Yeah, great. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Hilary Carty. I'm the Executive Director for CLAW Leadership and absolutely delighted to be with you this morning for some, afternoon for others, early evening for some as well. It's a lovely sunny afternoon here in London at least, and we're really pleased that you're able to join us for our discussion on adaptive leadership. I'm Executive Director of CLAW Leadership. I'm a Black woman with short mottled, owning my grey hair, and I've got on a couple of shades of green, matching or clashing very dynamically with a plant behind me, which is a fern. Really wishing you a welcome to this discussion. If captioning is useful to you, you can either do so via the closed captions button in the Zoom, or we're going to be posting the link, which is in the chat if you'd rather use that. So please do take availability of the captioning if that's helpful to you. So this is in fact our final in our series of 3 international leadership conversations on adaptive leadership. We're focusing this time on people. What does adaptive leadership mean for people? Both for leaders ourselves, but also the workforces with whom we're working. Workforces that are sometimes fixed and sometimes quite dispersed. So as an alumni of a leadership course led by and supported by either the British Council or CLAW Leadership, you are part of a powerful network leading in the arts, culture, and the creative industries across the globe. And interesting to see where we're getting different people from in the chat. Now, we're operating in a time of great change and uncertainty. We're all very aware of that. The contexts are shifting, and so are the demands on us as leaders of people, of places, and ultimately of our shared planet. So in this context, we wish to understand better what the common threads of leadership learning are, and those threads that would really give strong support to our alumni. We're working together, British Council and CLAW Leadership, to try and explore those threads and try and see how we can knot them together. As well as hearing from really inspiring panelists today, we hope that this session will provide an opportunity for you to meet and explore leadership learning and the needs with your global peers and help us to better understand how we can really inform the future of leadership support. So it's a little bit of hearing and stimulation, and also a little bit of helping us to just really get to grips with how best we can manage this leadership learning now and going forward. Little bit of housekeeping. Please would you put your mics on mute and raise your hand or use the chat function to ask a question when we get to that a little bit later on today. Please do name yourself, particularly for the breakout groups, and we do invite you to include pronouns. If you are going to ask a question in person, which is absolutely fine, please just say your name before speaking, because that's really helpful to our captioners. And thanks very much to our captioners who are joining us today. And so that we can try and disseminate that information, the session will be recorded. It's recorded for those purposes. Before I go any further, I'd like to introduce Kate Atkinson, our Head of Programs at CLAW Leadership, who's going to tell us a little bit more background about this joint project with the British Council. Kate.
Thanks very much, Hilary, for that warm introduction. I'm Kate. I'm a white woman with sort of shoulder-length blonde hair. Today I'm wearing a cream-coloured hoodie with thin blue stripes on it, and I'm sat on my sofa in Catford, South East London, where it's nice and sunny. So as Hilary said, I'm just give you a brief kind of introduction to a little bit about this project. We're delighted to be working in partnership with the British Council on this project, this global leadership focus programme. And today, as Hilary's already said, is the third in a series of 3 conversations around different aspects of adaptive leadership, and comes on the back of some mapping and some conversations that we've already had to explore where alumni, both from British Council programmes and from CLAW Leadership's programmes, are working across the globe in a range of different contexts. And what we're really hoping is that today's conversation will form part of that picture of where the dynamic needs around international arts and culture leadership exist, and will help to form a picture of where those commonalities but also some of the differences are, with a view to us beyond these three conversations to start to look at developing and co-designing some new elements of programming for leadership learning, which will be coming hot on the heels of these three conversations, and we will shape together with yourselves through conversation today, but also kind of with further planning. So as I say, really delighted to be sharing in this partnership work, looking forward to hearing from our guest speakers today and continuing these leadership sessions with you today, but also beyond and going forward. So handing back now to Hilary, who will start to introduce today's session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kate. And I have to say, it's been a pleasure to be working with the British Council to explore this contemporary area of leadership development. You know, if you look back sort of 10 or 20 years, it's really quite clear to see the acceleration that we've had in the last 3 to 5 years, not just with the pandemic, but certainly the pandemic has been absolutely cataclysmic in terms of some shifts. But even prior to that, we're genuinely seeing shifts in perspectives, shifts in context, shifts in circumstances, and that must surely land with shifts in who we are as individuals, what our work is in culture and the creative sectors, and what our work is with and for the people that we're working together with to try and make culture shift, to try and make change happen. I've been at CLAW Leadership now for coming on 6 years, and it has certainly been a dynamic time. I mean, one where we have had to rewrite the script so many times on what is really critical now in terms of leadership learning. You know, we run our courses, we run our fellowship program, and we're constantly saying, what are the topics that we really need to cover now? Not simply looking at, okay, here's a curriculum, but what's burning? What's really coming to the top? Kate and I have just been in weeks and weeks of interviews with potential fellows, looking at the next cohort of fellows. Now, it's quite a tough task when you're sort of sitting there through all of the process. But one of the joys that we experience is really getting to understand what's bubbling up for individuals and what's bubbling up in different areas, different regions, in terms of that whole issue of leadership. What are the challenges that leaders are facing? And so conversations like this allow us to take that discussion on a wider global scale. It allows us to speak with you and for you to speak together to share that kind of discussion of what's at the top of your agenda. Once we understand what's at the top of the agenda, it gives us a chance to then say, what might we do about it? What are the topics that we need to find a speaker to speak on one of our programs, or we might need to explore in a peer-to-peer conversation. There's always wonderful cross-learning in the room. So we're grappling with these issues. You know, we've got that fantastic phrase, it's a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. My heavens, couldn't we all write a couple of chapters on each of those words as how they're landing with us today? Just this morning, I was having a conversation. Someone asked me, you know, what's the biggest challenge for you? And I thought, biggest, I don't know about biggest, I got about 7 that are really tough at the top of my agenda, and I don't know how to say which one is the biggest. So one of the things that we're having to do is to be adaptive, and that's where that phrase comes from. We're needing to understand what's out there and look at what do we need to shift? What do we need to shift individually? What do we need to shift collectively? That's where the adaptiveness comes forward. So today we're trying to look at What does adaptiveness mean for people? How can we lead people creatively, collaboratively, and with impact? And that collaborative is really, really important, because the days of leaders being out front and sort of, you know, corralling the troops behind, that really went a long time ago. But actually, it's much more complex now. It's not simply about leading from the middle. You have to move. That adaptiveness is really real. And I feel it on a day-to-day basis. So what are the leadership practices and the models that we're turning to and exploring in these times? I'm really keen to hear how you are adapting your leadership. Critically, we need to understand how we as leaders, sometimes at the coalface, how can we stay well? How can we look after our own well-being? And how can we be resilient as leaders? What does resilience mean in this time? So those are some of the issues that we're wanting to really explore. Please do use this space to empower yourselves, to share any thoughts. They don't have to be deep. You don't have to have written a thesis on them. We're keen to explore. This is a safe space. So please share your thoughts in the chat. We do have breakout sessions coming up later, and that's a real time for you to just kind of go, how's about, here's what I'm thinking. But what we thought is, as we've got you here, let's try and just sprinkle some thoughts into the space to just kick things off. So I'm really, really thankful to Tumi and to Amaya, who've agreed to join us and to share some thoughts, to just sort of sprinkle some ideas into the space. So please join me in welcoming, first and foremost, Tumi Motsoatse, second time around. Tumi is the founder and managing director of Ayama Creatives and former head of programs at Business and the Arts South Africa. Tumi's core interest areas are inclusion, access, and impact. She's deeply passionate about leadership, women, and young people, and has played a critical role in the development of various platforms, campaigns, and programs. And Tumi is a Chevening Claw Fellow. Tumi, welcome.
Thank you, Hilary. Thank you so much. It's so fantastic being in the space with you all. And yeah, I look forward to hearing more thoughts from everybody in the room just around this topic of adaptive leadership.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts with us first and foremost. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So one of the things I did not put in my bio is that I'm also a mom to a 5-year-old little girl. Her name is Lubanzi Ayama. And yeah, that's important to note, because who I am now today in this moment is very much informed by her. Sure, so let me go straight into it. I know I've got 8 minutes. I'm gonna try keep to time and not do any African time business. Let me just quickly share my screen. All right, please give me a thumbs up, Hilary, if you can see my screen. Perfect, thank you. Yes, so my name is Buitumelo, Tumi with a Y, Motsoatse. On another platform, I'll spend some time, unpacking the Tumi with a Y. Today, I am really excited to be a part of this conversation. Both the British Council and the CLAW leadership teams have been quite instrumental in helping me shape my own leadership language and style. And so to be here in this moment is quite the full circle moment. Okay, but I must also start with the fact that since I've been invited for this program or for this workshop, I have been haunted by what I am going to be saying today. So for the past 3 weeks, I've been like, what are you going to add in this room? What are you going to add into this body of knowledge that is already so rich? There's so much data being collected, so much information being shared across different continents and across different communities. And as I've been thinking about this conversation today, this one scripture from my childhood keeps coming up, which, the main line particularly around nothing is new under the sun. So I was like, girl, what are you going to add to this conversation? And then the other thing that has been haunting me pretty much is a memory I have of myself in September 2019. I don't know if Hillary remembers the season of my life where basically it was the first time traveling to the UK for the CLAW Leadership Fellowship. And we were on our way to the first residential at Oxfordshire. And Miss Tumi with the Y packs 2 huge bags, literally the biggest bags I could find in that line. And there I am making my way through OR Tambo International Airport to Heathrow and literally struggling through Paddington Station. I think people were just like, sis, are you here to stay? What is happening? Did you not know that there are multiple platforms? And, as I've been preparing for this talk today, the song by Erykah Badu keeps coming up, like, bag lady, you gonna hurt your back. So these two thoughts have been kind of lingering and bubbling under, as you rightly put it, Hillary. And I thought, instead of just chucking them away, perhaps let me bring them into the room, because there's clearly something there. Instead of parking them and hiding them, there's clearly something that needs to be ventilated. And I thought, sure, let's come in here, bag lady. So these 2 points kind of really serving as a point of departure for how I've been thinking about adaptive leadership. So the first question we were asked to really reflect on is, how can we lead people creatively, collaboratively, and with impact? And as I was researching, I found a definition that Adrienne Maria Brown, I'm obsessed with them. I'm obsessed with them. And in their book, Emergent Strategy, this is how they describe a healer and a doula. We are walking, or at least the job or the responsibility of a healer and a doula. And they say we are walking alongside people as they realize and remember their wholeness. And I sat with that for some time. And then as I was researching a little bit more, I found a TED Talk by Marty Linsky, where he speaks about the fact that in adaptive leadership, instead of dealing with kind of the technical stuff, we're really dealing with heart issues. We're holding people's hands while we let go of really core parts of our identities. And that really moved me quite deeply, because I realized that as leaders, that issue of baggage becomes quite important. What has happened to us, what is happening to us is informing, is underscoring the way that we lead other people, the way that we lead with people. And so my responses to this question is that we need to burst our own bubbles. So oftentimes we get so obsessed, so immersed in our own missions, our own agenda, our own traumas, that we forget to actually look up. I guess in the way that they describe the balcony in the theory of adaptive leadership is really about stopping, giving yourself some time to let it sit for a bit, and giving yourself some time to look at it from a different perspective, to hear what other baggage, what other luggage people are traveling with, and to allow that to impact you too. It's also about creating room for multiple truths and liminality. So what I didn't tell you about that season in my life is that I had also just broken up with my baby daddy. I had left a place that I had been staying in for about 10 years, and also really grieving a season in my life, grieving a gallbladder that I had held onto for the longest time. Grace from the British Council had said to me during that season, sis, go and Google a little bit, find out what it means to have your gallbladder removed. And what I found is that there was built up anger, built up resentment, built up fear, and that's how I was leading. And so the challenge for me, or the thing that really had me shook, is how responsible was I with my own heart? And how responsible was I with other people's hearts? If I was leading from a place of inadequacy and fear and intensity, I wonder the impact that I had on the people that I was working, serving, and leading with. And so I want to add this particular provocation that hurt leaders hurt people, who hurt communities, and thus generations. So my challenge is not to hide or bring your baggage, but it's simply just to be aware of it. To be aware, to understand it, to accept it, and to ask ourselves, how is this baggage helping me move forward? How is it helping me to listen, to hear, and to be present with others in space? What are some of the leadership practices and models we are turning to? I think we are remembering that which has always been. And here on this continent, we have so much data and rich information about how our ancestors used to lead, how they used to do life. One of the most powerful proverbs we have is, it takes a village to raise a child. And literally, once you've given birth, you have groups and groups of women who come to take care of you, your child, and your family. So for me, it's really about remembering the power of intergenerational communities. There's stuff in their bags we don't want, but there's stuff in their luggage we need. The Sankofa philosophy extends on this and is really about embodying an ancient wisdom, immersing ourselves in the present, and entering into the future with hope, with intention, with love instead of fear. We're leaning again back to natural ecosystems and gravitating towards what is easy and sustainable, learning from nature, which has always been life's first preacher. Ubuntu, I am because you are. You are because we are. We are constantly or kind of remembering ways in which we can humbly realize that we all need each other. Here in South Africa, we have a beautiful model created by a team of individuals called the Creative Industries Marketing Stokvel. And Stokvel literally is about collaborating on building and sharing resources. And they have built a model that is so powerful, where they're not only building audiences for each other, but they are also building skills, communities that ensure that when you don't have the funding for your film, when you don't have funding for your theater show, we as a collective bring all of that stuff. And we give you an opportunity to solely focus on the craft while we do all the admin, the marketing, and the business that the creative wants to not necessarily deal with in that moment. What are we exploring? How do we stay well and resilient as leaders? I think this is my favorite slide. Adrienne Maree Brown speaks about going against specialness. So one of the things that happened as I was carrying my luggage through all these airports is that at every point I had to literally open the 2 bags to turn them into 3 bags, because Virgin Atlantic had only allowed me to travel with 3 bags, which meant that people actually got to see what was in my bag. They got to see the dildos, they got to see the bras, the not so fancy dresses, the not so fancy wigs in my bag. And so for me, it really is about moving towards true liberation, allowing ourselves to be seen, to be witnessed in process, in progress, accepting our fragility and humanness, pursuing transformative justice individually and collectively, bringing our full selves, including our lineages, including our family traditions. And you know what? It's also about leaving while the music is playing. Part of why my gallbladder had to go is because I held on to a relationship for too long. When I left Business and Arts South Africa, literally 5 years, my time had been up by the 3rd year, but I was holding on. I was holding on to my baggage. I was holding on to, yes, let's include more people, let's include more women. I had been so married to my own agenda and my own mission that I didn't even realize that the impact had been achieved. It was now time for a whole new world, a whole new team, a whole new vision altogether. We're leading from the heart, so we're praying and singing and meditating and literally dancing and crying through it. But we're also making kids' lunches. We're dropping the wigs and masks and letting our inner children run wild and baggage free. And this is my provocation, that this is not radical at all. Our ancestors have always been doing this. Nature has been telling us about constant movement and actualization and evolution. Our data has been available for years and centuries. I challenge all of us to think about the baggage that we are holding onto, not as a bad thing necessarily, but that there's data in there that we could use for future generations. But like Erykah Badu also said, sis, pack light. Ooh, ooh. I challenge us to pack light, because as we move with others, as we journey together, there's more that you're going to receive and more that you need to let go of, because the movement is constant. It's becoming, and it's self-generating or self-leading. And so I ended there. I hope I'm still within time. Thank you.
You're within time in spirit, Tumi.
I really tried.
It's absolutely fine. And it's so inspiring to have those ideas and thoughts, because those are absolutely what we're grappling with. You know, I love that phrase, what's the baggage telling me? What's the data in the baggage telling me? What should we be listening to that we're hearing, but not necessarily really paying attention to? Wonderful provocation to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to turn now to Amaya Pellegrin. Welcome, Amaya. Amaya is a creative strategist, coach, and facilitator whose mission is to awaken the full potential of people and organizations to thrive and co-create a sustainable future. She's delivered leadership development projects and coaching programs for over 700 organizations and individuals in the UK, Europe, Africa, Southeast Asia on creativity, organizational development, climate action, and intercultural understanding. Her most recent research, Feel Your Feelings, Thriving in the Cultural Workplace, is an exploration of how embodied emotional intelligence is crucial to our ability to creatively and collectively lead through these times of crisis. Amaya runs her own consultancy, The Field, regularly collaborating with other organizations dedicated to creative change making. And Amaya too is a fellow of the CLAW Leadership Program. So Amaya, welcome. Please do share with us some thoughts, unpack this leadership and adaptive leadership for us.
Thank you so much, Hilary, and hello to everybody who's joined us. And thank you so much to Tumi with a Y. My goodness, you gave us such an amazing kickoff, and I almost feel like you've said it all. And you're a hard act to follow, so it's a real honor to be speaking alongside you and hopefully adding my piece to this conversation. And I'm really looking forward mostly to hearing what all of you have to say in our discussion. I'm sure it will be really rich. So I'm just going to pop up my screen and share it. There we go. Hopefully you can see this. Oh, being a bit slow. So while my screen is playing catch up, I'm Amaya, and I am a white woman with dark black hair, wearing a bright blue shirt, and in the background you would see three characters who are my kind of guardians, and actually interestingly were kind of the start of my fascination with the emotional landscape of our lives, but also of leadership. So we have up here blue peace, yellow joy, and red anger. And I'm going to be picking up actually on some of the themes that Tumi wonderfully laid out for us, particularly how we relate to our baggage and how it is that we can dance with it, how we can dance with the parts of ourselves that we're carrying around, some of which feel like incredible burdens, but some of which actually could be these beautiful gems that can provide us with insight, wisdom, and support from our lived experience, and also from our generational lived experience, as we try to navigate with what, as Hilary said, is an incredibly uncertain and volatile environment. So I'm an occasional researcher, and thanks to my first CLAW fellowship, I got the chance to do a piece of research on vulnerability and cultural leadership, which really laid the ground for a lot of my work over the last 6 years, which is what's the impact of each of us doing what Tumi beautifully displayed actually for us, really leaning into who we are and how the different parts of us that express ourselves in specific moments can bring ways of responding to our environments and finding ways through uncertainty with precision and incredible personal power. And my latest piece of research was just going even deeper into this idea of thriving. What is it that really supports us to thrive? And what's the relationship of our feelings to the capacities that we're saying that we really need to be adaptive leaders? Capacities like creativity, like collaboration, like having the courage to really face the realities that we're encountering, whether that is the environmental challenges we might literally be dealing with as we go about our work, the social justice movements that we want to contribute to and that are crucial to our own liberation and self-expression, etc. Yeah, so I wanted to share some highlights from it really, and hope that we can unpack it in more detail as we go through. Sorry, my computer is being a bit slow. So the first kind of provocation that I wanted to give, and I've just up a slide, was titled From Resilience to Thriving, for those of you who need audio description. And it's a provocation that asks us to reimagine actually what we mean by resilience. We talk about resilience and well-being a lot in leadership and in the cultural sector. And when I've sat with leaders over the last couple of years and said, so what does resilience mean to you and how does it feel? What's emerged is this idea of resilience that's really about keeping going, coping, finding ways to creatively use resources and also bring other people along with us, taking care of their mental health and their own resilient capacities as we try and hold organizations together and evolve through periods of great difficulty. And when I asked them how that felt, over time, most of them came back with quite common answers, which was that this is absolutely exhausting. So I said, okay, maybe we need to start looking for a different way to talk about resilience, because actually when we're aiming for resilience in the current way that we're experiencing it and understanding it, we're basically kind of aiming for, you know, let's just keep going. So what's the reframe that's going to give us an opener to imagine a radically more beautiful way of being? And I found thriving as an alternative definition, which just opened a world of possibilities. So they're really closely related concepts, but thriving, as opposed to resilience being to continue to adapt and cope in the face of adversity, thriving is the capacity to positively integrate your life experience and use it as an opportunity to continue growing. So whether that be trauma or challenge or whatever it is, encountering life through a lens of how can I use this opportunity to grow and get closer to an expression of my authentic self. And as Tumi was saying, that involves also letting go sometimes of the identities, the ways of knowing and seeing that hold us back from leaning into that true and authentic nature. What the research kind of revealed is that being able to kind of step into and stay in that space is a choice. It does take our participation. It's not a magic button we can press. And there were some themes related to how we cultivate being in that place. The first was self-compassion, how we relate much more compassionately to ourselves, with non-judgment, with acceptance, with forgiveness. The second was, how do we nurture our vitality? Are we paying attention to our energy levels? What fills us up? What depletes them? And making sure that we understand our specific needs for keeping that in balance. The third was pursuing opportunities to learn and be creative. If we stop learning, if we stop having the opportunity to kind of play and create, even as leaders, especially as leaders, we start to stagnate. And that creates a whole world of challenge. Enjoying healthy social connections. One of the things I've heard most frequently from leaders that I work with is, I would really value a space where I can get together with peers and unpack common challenges, talk about what's going on with me in a space of trust and support. Of course, everyone who's done CLAW hopefully knows what that feels like, but I think sometimes it's something we take for granted. So how are we creating opportunities, not just within our cohorts and within these beautiful closed spaces that we have the privilege to be part of? How are we creating the opportunity for ourselves and also others to connect profoundly in this moment? And the last one was the ability to see things from different perspectives. So how are we able to access different perspectives? Like Tumi was saying, how do we kind of create ways to kind of rise up and look up and be able to see our own experience and that of others from a different lens? But crucial to my particular interest is that fundamentally self-knowledge and emotional intelligence and awareness of our feeling life is related to all of these different areas of being able to thrive. And I'd just like to take a moment to go a bit deeper into that and talk about the importance of feeling. So in the research, which was finished in January this year, I asked leaders, how are you feeling in this moment? And what are some of the emotional challenges that are coming up for you? And this word cloud, which for those of you who can't see, includes words like vulnerable, difficult, drained, disengaged, overwhelmed, firefighting. These were the words that leaders were using to describe how they were feeling in that moment and what some of the internal burdens were that they were sitting with. And what struck me was that even though, particularly in the arts, there is a high level of consciousness, let's say, about what we're feeling, there doesn't seem to be the tools and a kind of shared culture of how we process and use feelings to support and resource us as both for ourselves, but also as teams and groups of people. We're used to pushing away difficult feelings. So when people would tell me that they're frustrated or angry, or the response of, okay, what would you like to do with that, is I'd like it to go away. But often these feelings are coming up for really specific reasons. They indicate what matters to us. They tell us when important things are at stake, where we're ignoring or negotiating our needs, where we need a change for ourselves, also for collective groups of people, and what emerging problems are there that really need our attention, that might be difficult to take the time to look at, but could be more transformative than everything else on the to-do list if we were really to listen. And the thing that came out of this is really an awareness that we need to develop a more profound connection with our bodies. We need to bring our bodies or acknowledge the presence of our bodies in the space of leadership. Because often we speak about leadership as though our bodies are vehicles for carrying our brilliant brains around. And what's happening is that 99% of the leaders that I work with, first thing I say, what's the biggest challenge? I am mentally overloaded. The mental load is just too great. And so some of the practices that we were exploring in the research was about how we redevelop a more profound connection with our bodies and the felt wisdom that's there, that, as Tumi has said, cultures for millennia have valued more highly and in very profound ways the wisdom and the knowledge of the body, our intuition, feeling, sensation, gut feelings. You know, we have words for many of these things, but we don't always value them alongside the capacities of our brains. But our brains need all of that to support them. They can't do this adaptive leadership alone. So the body's also important because it's what we use to communicate. It is how we relate to one another, from the sound of our voices to the expressions that we make, the touch that we experience. the way we organize ourselves in space, all of that carries meaning and dynamics. And so developing our consciousness of that also helps us navigate from a place of well-being, in the sense that we really understand what's happening. So that's just to kind of give a taste of why it started to feel like, wow, we really need a revolution in bringing feelings appropriately into leadership in the workplace, and focusing less on what we think. And the first step of this has been to recognize the power of naming how we feel. So one of the inspirations behind this for me has been Brené Brown. Some of you might know her as the kind of vulnerability TED Talk superstar. And she has a wonderful new book out now called Atlas of the Heart, which is an exploration of our emotional landscapes and how we navigate them more effectively. She says, our language is our portal to meaning making, connection, healing, learning, self-awareness. Having access to the right words can open up entire universes. And when we don't have the language to talk about what we're experiencing, our ability to make sense of what's happening, and crucially, share it with others, is severely limited. So this is one of the tools that I've been using with people to simply say, what are you feeling? Most people, research tells us, can name maybe 3 or 4 core emotions. But when you put a map like this in front of people that shows not only the incredible range of feeling that we have access to, but the connections between them, what happens is we start to kind of open up a way of speaking about our shared and individual experience that's precise, that also connects us to not just why we're feeling something, but also what the resource behind it might be. So for example, someone I was working with was exploring the fact that she was constantly being told by colleagues that she was withdrawing in moments where they really needed leadership. And what evolved for her looking at this was saying, well, actually, like, what's behind that is fear for her. That withdrawal was a strategy to cover the fact that she was really scared. And realizing that opened up a possibility for her to talk to her team about fear in the workplace, the things that they felt in that moment was holding them back. And the truth of that conversation opened a door to say, okay, given that this feeling is present, how can we move through this creatively, resourcefully together to address what's holding us back, what is meaning that fear is becoming a barrier, rather than simply an alert system to something we need to pay attention to. So I'm conscious of time, and we can talk about maybe some examples afterwards if we have a moment to unpack together. But I just wanted to share like the 5 practices that came out of my work over the last 6 years, conversations, and also this research process, which are really transformative to navigating this emotional landscape and transforming it into wisdom, into the felt wisdom that we have. So the first practice is presence. Offering ourselves and being present with ourselves and other people in this moment, not allowing ourselves to get distracted by what's happened in the past or all of the things we're worried about happening in the future, but really taking the opportunity to be here. Because what happens when we do that is not only we can reconnect to a sense of being grounded, like on the ground in our bodies, with each other, but we also notice more subtle details, niggles, feelings. We notice more subtle indicators of opportunities or emerging challenges that, if we deal with them now, can either create greater opportunity or avoid having to deal with a crisis later on down the road. The second was curiosity. Curiosity is this kind of superpower to navigate the unknown. You know, our biggest fear in navigating uncertainty and volatility is, I don't have all the answers, and it takes time to generate them collectively. So one thing that turned out to be really transformative was, okay, let's embrace the unknown and lean into you know, what is also called a coaching style of leadership, as you will all know, having done CLAW. Really leaning into understanding what's happening within us and also with others, with open questions, active listening, and taking a non-judgmental standing point for really opening our minds and our hearts to what difference and diversity and other people's experience might offer as insight into the situations we're dealing with. The third was acceptance. So compassionate acceptance of what's true. This doesn't mean accepting whatever happens, including the things that really don't feel okay for us. In fact, this was just about accepting the truth of what we feel and the situations that we're facing in order to arrive at a really clear understanding of what our responsibility is within it and how we can be response-able in addressing the needs that arise within us or the needs that arise within our environment for action. The fourth was alignment. How can we honor ourselves by responding in a way that's informed by our values, our individual values, but also our shared values, our sense of purpose, the goals that we work towards, so that these are always informing the way that we choose to act and make decisions, making sure we focus on what we control. You know, in an environment of uncertainty, we control what's happening within us and our choices of how to respond. And the final one was about embracing fearless compassion, basically speaking the truth with respect, and seeking outcomes of conversations in the highest good. With compassion being kind of empathy plus, let's say. Empathy is our capacity to have emotional understanding. Compassion is our capacity to have emotional understanding, but respond with appropriate action, with action that actually begins to meet the needs of ourselves and those we are working with. And these are practices. These aren't things that we can just do immediately, but they are practices for adaptive leadership that we can develop together. And if I just finish, you know, these practices also help to develop what's being called psychological safety. So there's a wonderful researcher called Amy Edmondson, whose latest book is called The Fearless Organization. As Tumi said, how we can move from cultures of fear or fear-based control, direct and control style management to love-based cultures of thriving. And core to a lot of it, and core to a lot of what we're talking about, creativity, real collaboration, having the courage to be yourself and to speak your ideas that might be different or unconventional, is psychological safety. And this isn't about coddling people. This is about building trust, mutual respect, the ability to make mistakes and learn from them, and support to take initiative and express ideas, the support to take those risks that can open new doors and respond to unexpected circumstances in new ways. And so some of the things that really are core on top of those practices were about really modeling them, modeling self-compassionate authenticity, practicing nonviolent communication, that fearless compassion of being able to speak the truth with respect, and encouraging and facilitating learning, making our organizations into places where people can engage creatively with what's happening, learn from their engagement, and translate that into transformative knowledge and understanding. And finally, I'd just say, you know, obviously, much of this is focused on how we relate to ourselves, how we transform our baggage and the feelings that we have into precise insight. But it's really important to say that this, as a leadership practice, honoring yourself is not a selfish luxury. You know, there's still a culture of self-care is too much because there are so many other things to take care of. But if we are not taking care of ourselves, we're not in a place where we can really have compassion and model for other people how we create collective cultures of well-being, justice, and thriving in which we can navigate the circumstances that we're in. And this is especially true when things are complex. It's leaning into the ways of knowing that we have within us and developing our consciousness of those allows us to interface with complexity in much more agile and creative and responsive ways. So you taking care of yourself has a ripple effect. When you change yourself, you're also creating the opportunity to change your work, the culture of your teams, and the ways in which you're relating to the systems around you. So I hope that's useful and offers something for our juicy conversation to come. But thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Oh, I really have listened with relief almost to both yourself and to me, sort of voicing some of that challenge that we face as leaders, but also voicing some of the things that say, look after yourselves. You know, that we have permission as leaders to actually take care of ourselves as well as the groups with whom we're working. Interesting that you both touched on, I think you phrased it as thriving being relationship, and that links so immediately with what you said to me about Ubuntu and about, you know, I am because you are, and that connection between us. So wonderful. Thank you very much. We've got a few minutes for a couple of questions. If anyone in the space has got questions that you'd like to ask, then please raise a hand so that we can come to you, and then we'll shortly be taking a brief break and then going into some breakout rooms so that you can get to chew the fat on this. So it's not all just being spoken to, but you know, if you've got any questions for Tumi and Amaya, then please just place them in the chat now, or raise a hand and we'll try and come to you. But I have one question, which is really, again, that link about feelings matter, and how can we as leaders really give ownership and presence to how we are feeling when so much of our work is articulated and in the frame of looking after others? How do you just really sit comfortably within that space of self-care?
I'm happy to go. Thank you so much. I forgot to mention that I am a Black woman with brown hair and white shirt and a brown pullover. I think that, again, when I think about how our grandmothers have been doing it, it has always been about building an ecosystem around you that is pro-care, that is pro-self-care. The challenge is when we can't receive that care, right? So I remember when I gave birth, I immediately left my mother's house after 21 days because I was like, I can't do this. The village is now having too many voices and ideologies. I can't do this. And literally first day, I missed that, because there's something about having that community that is saying, while you are taking care of A, we will take care of B, C, D up until Z. While you are taking care and realizing and remembering yourself back to yourself, we will take care of the dishes, we will take care of the systems, we will build, we will support you on the other things that you need. But the people who are doing it must believe that you are worthy of it, and you too must be able to believe that you are worthy of that help. And I think that's where the tension sometimes come in, is that we don't want to receive the help from those particular people. And that's why I think going against specialness is so important, because the help might come from the person you don't even think is at your level or could provide the help that you need. I think that, I can't remember if it was in the TED Talk or in Emergent Strategy, but somebody was speaking about, it's collaborating with the enemy. Adam Cahan speaks about collaborating, being in space, co-creating with people you thought were your enemies, people who you thought share very different values, very different ideals and ideas. But there comes a moment when those are the only people available, and something starts to happen when you really surrender to that unknown and allow or give yourself permission to receive help, even from the places and the people you least expected it from. So it's an ecosystem of people who are pro-care, you receiving it and feeling worthy of it and allowing yourself to be fragile and human and weak, if that's even a thing, but also being okay with receiving help from very different spaces and communities, because they can shock you. They can really shock you. That interaction and that collision can really bring about a whole new path that you might have never expected, that brings you closer to home.
Thank you, Tumi. Amaya, any additional thoughts on how we can kind of put ourselves in that care mix?
Yeah, thank you, Tumi. Said so much there. I think I would just, I feel to add that some stories maybe. So somebody I was working with was feeling really creatively disconnected from her team particularly after COVID. But she had an executive role as well and was feeling like it's not quite her place, or she wasn't sure about her place to fulfill that need of hers to be creatively engaged, to express the talents that she had also as a creative producer. And that being bottled in her, unexpressed, was creating this kind of disconnection with the process that she was ultimately facilitating, the creative process in the company. It was creating this disconnect with her artistic director, and actually in accepting that actually one of the needs that I have to feel alive and committed and is to be more creatively engaged. Accepting that allowed her to redefine her role and have that conversation with other people. So sometimes, you know, it's not just about giving ourselves the permission to take care, it's about radically accepting the particular kind of care that we need and acting on that, having the courage to act on it. And you're absolutely right, to me, like sometimes that involves saying I need support from, you know, which might come from places that we're not prepared for, but we have to be ready to accept and to be vulnerable enough to open ourselves to. And the other story is somebody who came to me full of rage because she just came out of a negotiation with a major funder in a very difficult time, feeling like, you know, I'm so powerless. This system is ridiculous. You know, she was just felt in such a bad place. And when we kind of explored, like, okay, what does accepting the anger look like? Oh, I can't accept that I'm angry because I will write a horrific email and everyone will hate me. No, we don't have to act up from it. What does it look like? What's the need being expressed there? And accepting that anger, again, brought us to a place of, okay, this is about connection. So what does that deep desire for connection need? It needs to recognize that actually there's powerlessness on the other side in that particular negotiation. How can you now, from that place of accepting that there is something to be angry about, but you both share that experience, say, okay, what's the alternative here? What's the alternative to fighting my way through this? And the answer was invitation. Can I find a way to invite this person, my negotiator, back to the table in a way that acknowledges where we both are and cares for where we both are? And the other thing that came out was, okay, I need to fulfill this need for creative possibility in other ways. So again, how can I surround myself with people or create opportunities to meet that need? I think the point is, maybe finally, in response, giving ourselves the permission to self-care really is it's not just about well-being. It's about transformation. It is about contributing to the growth of a new leadership paradigm that is careful, that is acknowledging of us as human beings, not as workers, and especially in the arts and culture, where we're constantly facilitating transformative, beautiful, connecting, emotionally moving experiences for other people. It's important that we're giving ourselves the opportunity to do that from a place that is part of the same desire for change, if that makes sense.
Oh gosh, don't you just love it when there's nothing else to say? It's like, okay, I really don't need to try and summarize or do anything with that, because I think the two of you have been amazing in just stimulating some thoughts and very generously offering up some ways through. And as you've just said, making some new ways of leading. And what we'd love to do now is to open that up so that we can all kind of just explore that together. So thank you so much to Amaya and to Tumi for your wonderful, wonderful presentations and explorations of that adaptive leadership for people. I'm going to pass over now to Hilary Jennings, and Hilary Jennings has done the initial research with us on cultural leadership and the issues and challenges being faced globally. Hilary is a consultant and coach, and we're delighted to be able to benefit from her skills as well. Hilary, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to move now into the second part of the session. And this is, as has already been trailed by Hilary and Kate, it's a real opportunity for us to share as peers, having those provocations, those wonderful provocations having landed with us, to share some focused discussion in small groups, which will allow us to talk about what we've heard, how that resonates with our work and our contexts, whatever they are globally, and then also to help us shape the pilots that we're going to develop from these discussions. But first, I'm going to suggest we have a few minutes break, just so that we can, if we have any comforts we need to care for ourselves. So if we come back at 5:09 precisely, 5 minutes from now, whatever time that is for you. And we will then go into the breakout rooms refreshed. So I'll see you all in 5 minutes' time. We're going to go into the first of two breakout discussions, and I've just put the sort of details in the chat, so you have those to look at. We hope that each group will have somebody to help facilitate. But as I've said in previous sessions, if nobody seems to be taking the lead in facilitating the session, the group, please self-facilitate. And as CLAW alumni, I know that you're all well capable of doing that together. Make sure everyone has a chance to speak. If you can appoint somebody to scribe, just to pull together some key points. We'll try and go around the groups before all of the groups. If we don't, even if you could just drop some notes in the chat, that's really helpful for us when we come to gather this information together at the end. You'll have about 12 minutes, but I'll give you a half-time warning in the notes, and also I'll give you a note about when we're coming back, so you'll be clear. And the question for this, the two discussions, the first session is really just opening out our thinking from the provocations. So to share what resonated with you from those provocations, the wonderful provocations from Tumi and Amaya, and also then to what does that say about the common leadership challenges that we have? What's common between us, because we'll all be coming from different perspectives and contexts. So are there any common leadership challenges that are coming out of this provocation? And then the next discussion, we'll start to think about the leadership development we might need. So this, it's really just opening out our thinking as to what those challenges are. Okay, so if we're ready, shall we go into the discussion groups? I'll see you in about 12 minutes. I think that was a useful, if perhaps a bit brief conversation to start with. We'll hopefully have a little bit more time in the second discussion. It would be really great to hear something from each of the groups. If there is someone who's willing to just share a little bit of the highlights from your discussion. think there was 3 groups. So is anybody up for sharing? Tyrrell.
Hi, yeah, I was scribe, so yeah, I can give a quick summary of what happened in our group. Martin talked about how he really connected with the sort of Tumi's African perspective and experience, really resonated with what he was going through. He posed the question, how do I maintain those relationships with those who are close to me personally in my personal life that maybe don't understand what I'm chasing in my creative life, and talked about that kind of difficulty bridging those gaps. And Tumi made a really interesting point that sometimes we can get so lost in our craft that by the time we look up, there's no one really around us, and we're actually become very, very isolated, and sort of really underline the importance of staying connected within a community, both inside the arts industry, but also in your personal life. Martin also asked the question about how can he gain confidence soliciting resources and dealing with disappointment. And I think that's actually a really interesting thing that connects to the other what Amaya was saying about self-care. And I think disappointment and rejection is something that we haven't touched on in a massive way, but I think it's something that actually all artists have to deal with. And it's kind of an interesting, how do you prevent that from impacting your ability to do your job, you know, when you're dealing with lots of rejections. And Tumi had also a thought in response to that was the best way of doing that is by collectively leveraging resources, and that you're stronger together in a community rather than just on your own. And Robin also talked about the importance of bringing to the forefront philosophies and outlooks which might have been sidelined by colonialism, and that some of those outlooks might have a lot to teach us about some of these things. I was also talking about how in Africa things have kind of tilted in favor of where most of the money is in the hands of very few people. So resources for artists are they're very concentrated among a few people, and that's a challenge to deal with. And I mentioned something at the end very briefly in our last 20 seconds about how I really resonated with Tumi's gallbladder story about holding on to something so tightly that it really makes you ill. And it's quite interesting for, I guess, for artistic leaders, that sometimes you have an idea that maybe is actually really, really difficult or isn't quite working, and things just aren't quite happening. And actually the importance of just moving on is sort of something we maybe don't talk about enough. So I thought that was really, really interesting. That's my hopefully accurate summary. I hope if anyone wants to dispute or add anything to it, please do so.
Thank you, Tyrrell. That was fantastic. You covered a lot of ground. Would anyone like to speak from the other groups? I'm seeing any hands go up.
I think Vandana's got her hand up.
Vandana.
Should I go?
Sorry, I couldn't see you.
No, that's okay. So I was in the group with Claude and Nadia from Mexico and East Africa. Claude, I think, had some technical problems and had to drop out of the meeting room. And Nadia went first and spoke about, actually her point of view and my point of view kind of matched most of the places. She spoke about vulnerability as a point that resonated with her, but also finding it very difficult being working in the government, in the culture sector, that she is not able to be vulnerable in front of men. And, and to really display what she's feeling because she's being judged, all the time. And culture is also not a sector which is taken very seriously. In any case, it's not as important as economy, for example. So, so that's what she felt. Whereas I felt similarly. That most of my experiences are pre and post COVID. So pre-COVID, my organization that I lead was full of women. It was easier for me to be vulnerable and to build things with them tell them about the challenges that I was facing, and solve them with my fellow women. But post-COVID, somehow something has happened. I have an office full of young men, and it's very difficult for me to be not so strong in front of them. I have to lead from the front, and so I have to put up a brave front all the time. So being vulnerable is not an option right now. Plus, we are in the process of raising funds for our creative tech company. And over there, again, with front managers, it's very difficult to be yourself. You have to portray something else. You have to portray this very confident, person that you are, that you may not be feeling at that point in time, but you want to project that. Otherwise, there's no money, and the money is still in the hands of men most of the times. I'm really sorry. Okay, so and the second point was. Nadia and I felt that there is this sadness, the challenges in leadership I am feeling, because I lead a creative organization full of animators, illustrators, writers, researchers. What I am feeling, and what Nadia is also feeling, is that people are sad, scared, generally in this sector. Maybe they are in every sector, but this is a sector we're working in. So people are feeling demotivated, and it's very difficult to get them to experiment, to go out of their comfort zone, to do more, to push the envelope. And so that's the feeling we were feeling. So I think Nadia has written in the chat also how to use vulnerability, as a strength. So these are the points that both of us felt in our group.
Thank you, Vandana. I think it's a really salutary thing to think that context is very key in terms of our ability to be vulnerable. Thank you for bringing that. Anything from the final room before we move to the second discussion? Is there anyone from the third space who's willing to just share some thoughts? Okay, if not, but Maya, that would be great.
Here. Sorry, I didn't know how to raise my hand. Well, very quickly, we talked, for instance, that Joanna was worried that sometimes when she feels sad or angry, or she's having like a bad day, she kind of resembles that into her team. And that sometimes she's worried about how to communicate that to her team, or to someone, especially a project manager, if I recall. And we also talk about how sometimes as leaders we put ourselves, in order to sort of protect them, a mask and this mask also affects us because we keep those feelings only to ourselves. So we chat with Amaya as well, that maybe when you put names on the actual things that are happening, like fear or preoccupation or whatever the name of that feeling is, and you try to kind of share it with your team, sometimes you get some surprises, and the team, as opposed to reacting with that same feeling, they actually have some solutions to that, and they can become more empathetic. So sometimes we put these masks. And then Amaya was saying that if we don't openly share these, sometimes we are kind of putting those masks on them as well. So it was sort of about that and other things, but I think.
Thank you, Mar. That was it's so great to hear such a depth of conversation happening in the breakout rooms. So I'm going to suggest we go back into the second. You'll be in the same group, so you would the people who've been before, and the same process if you can self-facilitate and if somebody can be ready to feedback. And the question, we're going to go a little in now to thinking about what leadership development do you need? What's needed to deal with these issues that are coming up around vulnerability, around resilience, and around our feelings. So we'll go into groups again, and again I'll give you a note halfway through and a note at the end, so you know how soon you're coming back. But is that okay with everybody? If so, we'll head back into groups. Okay. So again, it would be really interesting to hear what you've been talking about. Is anybody up for sharing? Vandana.
So, so we had the same group. Claude mentioned wanting to get more technical support, skills, upgradation, and also ability to get to funding to upscale, because social enterprise, it's really difficult, he's feeling. And also he feels that the work that he's doing, he didn't say it in these many words, but design intervention to do interesting stitching, sewing things is what would help him a lot. So which also comes under skill, slightly towards design. So some prevention design would be important for him. I again felt that what we need is, and probably a time designated in the month to discuss those problems, a more vibrant, thriving community of alumni, so that problems could be discussed and maybe solution already exists elsewhere and can be easily applied. Claude also mentioned the skills of becoming a leader, which goes into coaching, which was also a shared concern with all three of us, that some sort of personal coaching, organizational coaching, where we could give our specific problem and find a specific solution, which we could apply in our workforce. In our workplace. So that was another one. And then we did be having a mentor or a community manager, who can take care of 3-4 singles community together and knows what each one of them is involved in, and is able to then connect the dots and help somebody leverage something, because we said that, as Tumi said, we need a village to raise a child, and so we are all looking for that village.
I like that. So we need to create our own alumni village to support each other. You broke up a little bit during that. I got some feedback around coaching, around opportunity to learn from each other. But if there was a chance for somebody to type up a couple of notes in the chat, it might just pick up in case there was something we missed. But I love that idea of a village to support our alumni. I think Katuna's hand up, was that right? And Tirel. So Katuna first and then Tirel.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me? Yes, I was cut in the middle of a sentence, so if I may, I'd like to finish it. I was in the room with Marina Meyer and the beautiful blonde lady who I don't remember the name. Jana, yes. And I was just saying that it's been a very long day at work and very hard day at work, and it was so pleasant to have a chat and to have a very honest conversation with ladies. So it's a perfect ending for my day. I just wanted to highlight that. Yes, we spoke about how important it is to surround yourself with the right people, and the people who inspire you, and people who want your well-being, who want you to succeed. It might not be too many people, but it can be several, but it is worth it to be around people who resonate with you and who reflect good energy. And also we spoke about changing location, changing places, because apparently 2 of our ladies had that experience, and they've changed places, and how
Oh, we've lost Katuna completely, I think. Cyril, should we come to you, and then if she doesn't return?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we had a really interesting discussion actually that was kicked off by Robin talking about how her experience supporting artists and how she'd often been like kind of everything from a kind of mum to a shrink, and that she spent a lot of time kind of absorbing pain, and she was talking about a theory that I'd not come across before called the palm theory, where you look at your palm and you imagine each finger is like a tunnel of feeling, and that most people, when things happen, they run down one of the tunnels of intense feeling, and that decisions are best made if you can stay in the middle, in a kind of calm place without going into one of those tunnels. Shall I hand back over to Thea?
We lost you briefly.
Yes, my phone died, so I'm so sorry. Yes, so I was saying that yeah, we've discussed the importance of surrounding yourself with inspiring people, and also I feel, and I also mentioned that self-awareness, self-reflection, and also appreciation and taking care of yourself also helps you to lead, and also helps you to spread this energy and this positiveness, and also makes you sort of a person who wants people to want to be around. So that also counts, and because you spread this energy that you have about yourself and how much you appreciate yourself, and it's how you receive that energy back. So these are the main things that we've discussed.
Thank you for that. Cyril, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, so yeah, just going on from the sort of discussion about yeah, this kind of artist support being a lot about people's pain and difficult things that are going on, and then I was talking about how like a lot of artists just get so battered by the industry. They often have all sorts of complex things, emotional things going on, and that just it's such an insecure industry. It's so like the work you're doing is very personal, like the fact that then if then money problems result or as a result of like there's a lot of rejection. Those rejections can feel like that's a rejection of your personality. Then it also intersects with economic difficulties that can cause all sorts of things for people. And I mean that's just a few of many of the things that a lot of artists have, but there are just so many other things. There's such a long list of problems that people can develop. After 5 or 10 years in the industry, it's kind of a miracle that anyone doesn't have any psychological or emotional problems. And I think that's kind of just kind of a feature of the sort of deep insecurity that is embedded in a large part of the industry. And we were also talking about how in big institutions, there's all sorts of things that enable people's personal development, like, appraisals, these kind of 360-degree kind of feedback sessions or whatever. All of this institutional stuff that's around supporting someone's development. And actually, the majority of artists are kind of very much in isolation and don't have any of that kind of community. And Tumi was saying about how some of the things that she finds to combat that are like, there's one person that she has a relationship with who they used to work in an institution together, and now they don't. And the thing she said she really missed was these Monday check-ins. So as a result, every single Monday at 9 a.m, these, Tumi and this other friend, they check in every Monday to see how they are, and to help each other with whatever happens to be going on. And then another thing that she finds really helpful is that she's part of a group of 4 artists called the Bounce Back Ensemble, and they have a kind of an SOS sort of thing within their group where whenever they really need something, or they need advice or support or anything with what they're dealing with, they just ask this group for support, and that can be really, really helpful. And then we got into a kind of quite a really interesting discussion around like the kind of ecosystem around you and the importance of building this ecosystem to support you when things maybe don't go right. And there was a lot of talking about like mentoring and finding the right mentors. Tumi was advising Martin and, you know, finding a mentor who really does know what it's like to maybe not have money one day and things like that, to understand where you have the comparable experience to you to help navigate through it. Yeah, we also Tumi also finished with something really interesting that was about going back to your values and examining whether or not your values are really your values. It was in response to something Martin had said about like kind of being a real perfectionist about like getting a report in and spending a long time kind of agonizing over just what was essentially just a reporting for a project that went really well. And she was saying how she used to have this idea of like excellence being 100% that came from, was it your father? I can't remember whether it was father or mentor.
And my very first boss, the first person whose leadership I was under, yeah. Yeah,
so her first boss, and she really had this idea in her head, which became like really overwhelming and really, really difficult. And actually what she realized was that that wasn't really what she thought or her art was about, and there was something a bit deeper and more personal to her that made a bit more sense and was just a little bit less brutal to live with. So going back to your values and kind of like assessing them is like a really interesting way of like dealing with maybe some of these mental health things. And something that I really wanted to say but didn't have the time was that I had like some advice that I heard from the director Katie Mitchell when she was like teaching a bunch of young directors over lockdown. She said that if there's something like to do with your mental health that is getting in the way of your work, that's preventing you from just going about what you need to do to live and survive and work in the industry, then just get some help. And the importance of that, because the industry is so difficult as it is, that it's almost impossible to navigate with like sundry mental health problems. So that's just something, yeah, that so I would have thrown in there if there was the time, is that the importance of kind of the industry or your mentor or whatever. It doesn't necessarily isn't where you're going to find the solutions to those things.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Tyrell. That's such, I got these very, very rich conversations in the breakouts, and that's really great for us to hear those. I'm already starting to think about what this could mean for us in terms of next steps. We've come to time, so I'm going to head into a close here, but I just wanted to let you know what the next steps are for keeping involved. We'll email you a post-event form, which does give you the opportunity, if there's anything you're carrying or anything you heard in the discussion that you would really like to emphasise. It may be something you didn't even get a chance to say in the discussion. You can put that into the post-event form so that we will pick that up. We'll also send you links to the other two sessions, the recordings of the other two sessions, and you can watch those, and you can also, if you didn't join them, you can also feed back in the same way on those sessions too. And you can also contact us directly. And I think Lucy's going to add the email to the chat. So I'm noting that it's a minute past time, so I feel like I should close with a huge thanks to our panelists, Tumi and Amaya, and to Hilary, who chaired the discussion and added so much to it. And hope that you all really enjoyed the discussion this afternoon. It felt really rich to me, hearing you feeding back. So thank you so much, and do spread the word when you get the other sessions. Do share them with colleagues who weren't able to be here.
Thank you, everyone.
And if you want to unmute and say goodbye, that's always nice to hear everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All the
Bye.
best.
Take care.
Cheers.
So well.
Thanks hugely.
Take care.